Hey friends, it's Tyler. Thank you so much for joining me. Welcome back, or if this is your first time, welcome. It has been a little while since I did my last YouTube video. I spent the past week at Clamour Summit, which was a YouTuber event. I got to catch up with some of my favorite people, including these guys here. I'll put the link to their channels in my description because I love them so much. But today we are going to get back into it. I'm going to be posting more videos, I promise. So if you're not subscribed, please make sure to subscribe. I would appreciate it so much. Okay, so today I am going to be doing a video on something that I'm asked about quite often, which is the difference between living in America, Australia, and New Zealand. For those of you who don't know, I am originally from New Zealand, hence this accent that's going on. I don't know, it's kind of a bit blended as well, which I'll talk about soon. I grew up in New Zealand, then I moved to Australia and I lived there for 3 years, and then for the past over 2 years now, I have lived here in America. So obviously there are lots of differences between these three countries. I went onto my TikTok and my Instagram and I asked you guys to tell me which questions you had about living in one of these countries, maybe the differences between some of these countries. I have read a few of these questions, but I have not read all of them, so I'm going to be answering them off the top of my head, and I am very excited. Let's get into it. Okay, question number 1. Why did you live in all those places? This is such a good question, actually. Okay, so here's my life story. No, I am an actor, and for the past, basically my whole life, but definitely for the past 10 years, everything that I've done has really been to achieve this dream of being an actor and to find work. New Zealand was great, but there weren't many opportunities for what I wanted to do. I then moved to Australia and the opportunities were definitely better. I worked more as an actor in Australia. I taught more. I went to way more auditions than I was doing in New Zealand, so that was a really good step. And then the opportunity came to come to America, and America is just on a whole nother level in terms of opportunities for auditions, in terms of opportunities to just make a living from your craft. In my experience anyway, there's been so much more opportunity here than I had in the other places. So yeah, that's why I lived in all those places. Good question. Question number 2, have you ever met a huntsman spider? I have several times. If you don't know what a huntsman spider is, I'm going to put a photo here. Sorry. The first time I saw a huntsman spider was before I moved to Australia, when I was actually just on vacation there. But the funniest thing, well, I think this is funny, is that huntsman spiders are like harmless, I think. They're not poisonous. I don't think they are, or they're very, very unlikely to harm you. Whereas then there are spiders in Australia which are like this big that can kill you. Spiders are friends, not food. Was there a big difference in what food people ate at different times of the day? Ooh, good question. Not really, I think. All of these countries are very like Western white countries, so I don't think it was that much difference. Obviously there are like some differences. In New Zealand, I remember cooking on the barbecue a lot in the morning for breakfast, which was very odd to some foreigners. Like we would cook, our bacon and eggs or whatever you have on the barbecue in the morning. People found that strange, but I think they do that in Australia as well. Let me know if they do it in America. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just Europeans who find it weird. Are there as many deadly animals in New Zealand as in Australia? No. We don't have snakes in New Zealand. We have poisonous spiders, but definitely not the same variety. We don't have, what else can kill you in Australia? Everything. We don't have dingoes. Yeah, there are definitely more deadly animals in Australia. Have you ever been bitten by a venomous creature? Oh, okay. Not that I know of. However, once I had like this really, really weird bite on, no, my foot. No, it was definitely on my foot. And it really swelled up. And I thought that might have been a whitetail spider that we get in New Zealand, but I never saw. And it was when I was sleeping. So maybe something definitely bit me. Do you know anybody who had a pet wallaby? Not personally, but I do know a lot of people do. I had a friend who lived more in like the rural area, and there were always so many kangaroos, and there were heaps of possums and definitely snakes around his house. That were kind of pets. Yeah. What was the candy like compared in each of the three countries? Ooh, this is a hot topic. Okay, so for me, I have to say New Zealand, just because that's where I grew up and that's where I probably tried the most. Also, I really, really love like fruit gummy candy, and I just feel like the fruit gummy candy in New Zealand is just, so good. I miss it. What was the biggest culture shock in the different places? Ooh. Okay, I think the one that comes to mind, the one that I kind of say the most, is that, again, this is just completely generalized, just based on my own experience. But I feel like New Zealanders are quite reserved. Well, I feel like we're kind of taught to be that way. So everyone is just kind of a bit like, just feels a bit more low key and stuff. But then in Australia, I feel like people are a lot more like direct. And then in America, it's like another level up. To be completely honest, I actually love it. I love people being direct with me. I find it much better than people kind of beating around the bush. Obviously with kindness, I think we should all be kind, but I love being open and discussing things and not just like, shoving things under the table. So I do like the directness, but yeah, sometimes there were times where people would say something to me and I was really offended because I thought they were being mean, but they were just being direct and I wasn't used to it. So yeah, that's one thing. Which country has your favorite snacks? Oh, see, again, there's things I love from all countries, but I have to say New Zealand again. Okay, I know this isn't a snack, this is a drink, but in New Zealand, we have this energy drink called V. It is my favorite taste of anything ever, and I miss it so much. They don't have it here. They have it in Australia, but they don't have it in America, so. Was it good living in Australia? I loved living in Australia so much. I made so many amazing friends. As an actor, I found it quite manageable to live there. I felt like the amount you get paid compared to the amount of rent is very fair. When I was living in Melbourne, it was voted the number one most livable city in the world, and I could really understand why, just because it was pretty easy and comfortable to live there. You don't have to pay for healthcare, which is insane, especially coming from Australia to America. Very, very different. Oh no, my camera just died. So I'm going to do the rest of it on my phone. Yay, technology. I should really learn to charge my camera. Next question. Okay. What is the weirdest animal you have ever seen? I have seen many, many types of animals, and I think for me, it's not so much the weirdness of them, it's the context in which I've seen them. Like I've seen them in really unexpected places, or I've been like, this animal lives here? I had no idea. One time I was driving home in Melbourne City. It was like the middle of the night. It was like 3 a.m. or something. And suddenly, this was like in the city center, there were these two large animals on the road in front of me. And I thought they were dogs. They were like the same size as dogs. They were foxes. And I didn't even know that they had foxes in Melbourne, especially not in the city. And they were big. I always thought, I'd never seen a fox before. I always thought a fox was like maybe like this big, and maybe sometimes they are. These were seriously, they were like this big, they were like this tall, their tails were massive. I was shook. It was funny. Yeah, I didn't expect to see that. It's always funny for me seeing squirrels as well, because in New Zealand we don't really have rodents like that. I mean, we definitely have rats and mice and stuff, but you never see them. Very, very rarely. It's pretty much just birds. So then to come to America and there be squirrels like all over the place is very funny. Very funny. What did you like about living in New Zealand? I loved growing up there. I love that it's a small country. I love the beaches. I love it. It's just so many people from New Zealand will understand this. It's just hard to, if you want to work in an industry that is small, it's always going to be difficult. And the performing arts industry in New Zealand is like this big. So yeah, it's hard to do things there, to be completely honest. I did love living there, and all of my family still lives there, so hopefully I'll be able to go and see them very, very soon. Where has been your favorite place to live? USA, Australia, or New Zealand? Okay, again, I like them all for different reasons. I actually love living in America. I'm very, very grateful to be here. I'm very grateful for the opportunities that are coming my way. I'm grateful for the people I'm meeting, so I would not want to be anywhere else at the moment. But I still miss New Zealand and Australia very much. It's different, very, very different. Hi, Tyler. Is it true that it's harder to meet people in New Zealand than in the US? Interesting. Again, okay, this is just my experience. My experience of meeting people in New Zealand was kind of like everyone knows everyone. I mean, I lived in Auckland City and I worked in Auckland City. So like every single person I met knew someone somehow. There was always a connection. So sometimes that's a good icebreaker. Like, oh, you go to university. Do you know this person? Yes, you do. Oh, they're my best friend. There. But again, I think it's just the amount of people. New Zealand has 5 million people. America has 450 million people. So the scope of people to interact with is much bigger. Did you learn anything about yourself? So much. So much. Oh my God. I could go into a whole video on this. But I really, really do think that when you move to another country, you really do find out more aspects about yourself. Like I was saying earlier, like I now know that I like being very, very direct. And so I like that about American culture. If you're thinking of moving to another country, do it. Even if it's just for a year, I think it's a really good thing to do. Which country has better tea and coffee? Ooh, again, New Zealand, I have to say. In New Zealand, it's quite common if you go into a cafe, you can get like a bowl, like a coffee bowl. I haven't seen those. They must have them, right? But I haven't seen them, but you get like a bowl, and I miss that. I miss my mocha bowl. Which had the best fast food? Ooh. I mean, look, to be honest, most of the fast food in New Zealand and Australia is American. Like I grew up with Pizza Hut, Burger King, McDonald's, Wendy's. Like it's all very much American. My favorite fast food is Chipotle now. I love Chipotle so much. And we don't really have anything similar in New Zealand. I say it's quite funny, especially if you live in California, to hear this, but in New Zealand, Mexican food is pretty expensive. Like it's kind of counted as like it's an international cuisine. So we don't have Taco Bell, we don't have Chipotle. It's quite expensive. So then coming to, especially when I lived in California, where it's everywhere and it's like super, super cheap. That was amazing. Who has better fish and chips? New Zealand. No. I actually had really good fish and chips in Australia as well. I like my fish and chips. I don't like when it's super oily. Like when you bite into it and it's just all oil. I'm not a huge fan of that. I have not had fish and chips in America. I have not had it while I've been in this country. Shocking, man. I got to get onto that. What was the most expensive to live in? Okay, again, this is a very difficult question. I can only talk from my own experience. Personally, I found Australia to be the most affordable in terms of, as I was saying, how much you get paid compared to how much things cost. So to give you an idea, when I was living in New Zealand, I think minimum wage was $13. I then moved to Australia. The Australian dollar is worth more than the New Zealand dollar, and straight away I went from $13 to 23. I think 23 was the minimum, and it's even higher now. So getting paid $23 an hour to work, a hospitality job, and then on Sundays you get paid double. When it's holidays, I think you get a lot more than I ever got living in New Zealand. But then again, I think it depends on the industry you work in, because in Australia, even though I was able to get work, it was still hard. Whereas when I came to America, I just felt like there were so many opportunities, so many teaching opportunities, just so many opportunities. Sorry if this is offensive, but as a British person, I've always wondered what the difference was between the Australian and the New Zealand accent. I am so offended. No, I always say, I think if you know people from New Zealand and you know people from Australia, and you hear the difference, it becomes obvious. But obviously, if you never hear it, then yes, it's hard to tell. All to do with our vowels, the way we say our vowels. The example I always use is fish and chips. So in New Zealand, we say fish and chips. Fish and chips. Whereas in Australia, they say fish and chips. Fish, chips. So yeah, that's the main thing. It's those, Australia has those very strong E vowels, those fish. Whereas New Zealand, we kind of just skip a lot of our vowels and just say fish, chips, fish, chips, fish, chips. So blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I hope that helped. Did you ever see where H2O was filmed? I did. I've been to the Gold Coast several times. I love the Gold Coast. I grew up going there. The first time I went was literally the year H2O came out, I think. So I went to SeaWorld and I was like, oh my God, and freaking out. And I still, of course, even last time I went, which was 2 years ago, before I started even making H2O TikToks and stuff, I went to one of the beaches. I think it's the beach in where Emma first turns into a mermaid, and I was like, here it is. So yes, I love it. Was it weird having to get used to the way the weather was in all three? Yes, very, especially since I've never lived in snow before, and so it snows where I live now, which is insane. And to me, it's still so magical when it snows. I run outside and I'm like, ah. Also, it was funny because growing up in New Zealand, I'd always heard that Australia was so hot all the time. But I moved to Melbourne, and Melbourne is very different. Melbourne is cold and windy for most of the time. And then in summer, there's 3 weeks where it's insanely hot. And then for the rest of the year, it's pretty cold, to be honest. Are the summers brutal in Australia and New Zealand? I'm going in summer of 2023 and I'm afraid I'll melt. Oh my gosh. I think again, it depends on where you're from. I went to Orlando in the summer. I've never been that hot in my life. It's such a different heat as well. It's so humid. I feel like in Australia it's very dry. In New Zealand it can get very humid. You'll be fine. Just drink lots of water. Okay, thank you all so much for asking those questions. I loved answering them. Surprise, I actually have loved all the countries that I've lived in. I'm so grateful to be living in America right now, but I loved living in New Zealand and Australia, and I miss them so much. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe. I will be doing more content about different places I've lived. Of course, I will keep doing my acting content as well. I'm so excited. I love you all, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.